In 1944, the United States and the Soviet Union tried something so ambitious that it still feels almost unreal. American heavy bombers would strike targets in Nazi Europe, keep flying east, land on Soviet airfields in Ukraine, refuel, rearm, and then hit new targets on the way back. The project was called Operation Frantic. On paper, it looked brilliant. Instead of always returning to Italy or Britain, B-17s and their fighter escorts could fly shuttle missions across the entire continent. Germany would be attacked from one direction, then another, stretching its defenses and putting more targets within reach. For a brief moment, in the summer of 1944, it worked. At Poltava, Mirgorod, and Pyryatan, American crews landed inside the Soviet Union and found something that wartime propaganda had promised, but history rarely shows this clearly: actual cooperation. US airmen and Soviet personnel stood beside the same aircraft, shared food and ceremonies, exchanged gifts, and posed for photographs under the wings of bombers and fighters that belonged to completely different worlds. That was the extraordinary part. The United States Army Air Forces and the Red Air Force were not natural partners. They distrusted each other, used different methods, answered to different political systems, and shared only one immediate goal: destroying Nazi Germany. Yet in June 1944, dozens of American B-17 flying fortresses came down onto Soviet fields at Poltava. Mustangs landed at Pyryatan. Soviet Yak fighters circled nearby. For the men on the ground, it must have felt like a glimpse of an Allied future that might actually hold. Then came the point of failure. After one of the early shuttle missions, German reconnaissance tracked where the bombers had landed. In the night of 21 to 22 June 1944, the Luftwaffe struck Poltava with devastating precision. Pathfinder aircraft illuminated the field. Bombers followed the markers and hit the parked American aircraft almost exactly where they were concentrated. The result was catastrophic. Of the 73 B-17s at Poltava, 47 were destroyed, and most of the rest were damaged. Huge stocks of fuel, bombs, and supplies were also lost. The attack lasted for nearly 2 hours. American crews in slit trenches could only watch their mission burn. The Soviet night defenses that had been judged sufficient proved almost useless against a carefully prepared raid. That single night exposed the weakness at the heart of Operation Frantic. The plan depended on trust, coordination, and strong local defense. But the Americans had limited control over the Soviet bases, limited freedom to improve defenses, and limited ability to respond once the bombers were on the ground. The operation did continue. More shuttle missions were flown. Bombers hit targets in Germany, Hungary, and Romania. Fighters escorted supply drops to the Warsaw Uprising later that summer. But the spirit of the project was broken at Poltava. Because Operation Frantic was never just an air campaign. It was a stress test for the alliance itself. In the photographs from those weeks, you can still see the two stories side by side. First, the optimism. American and Soviet officers smiling together, crews standing under B-17s, Yak fighters parked beside American bombers, even volleyball games and relaxed conversations at the edge of a brutal war. Then the aftermath. Blackened wrecks on the runway, officers walking through shattered aluminum, and bombers that had crossed Europe only to die while standing still. That is why Operation Frantic deserves to be remembered. Not because it was the biggest bombing campaign of the war, not because it lasted long, but because it captured in one little-told episode both the incredible reach of Allied cooperation and the hard limit of that cooperation almost at the exact same moment. For a few weeks in 1944, American flying fortresses lived on Soviet soil. Then one German night raid showed how fragile that partnership really was. It was one of the strangest and most revealing missions of the Second World War.